What's up, everyone? Welcome to another UFC Quick Picks here on the Mayo Media Network. We have UFC Vegas 94 this weekend. Amanda Lemos versus Verna Jandiroba in the main event. 12 fights on the slate, and it is one of our most competitively lined slates in recent memory. The biggest favorites on the card are around minus 200. Salary is not really an issue on the slate. We have a ton of obvious value, so there's a lot of intriguing dynamics on this slate that should help make it a fun one to build lineups, and I think we'll see a few fun fights as well. Before I get into the card, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and once again, give me your favorite underdog to target this week. Maybe you have an obvious one, but there are many, many live dogs, which I think really presents a lot of options for us this week. So I'm looking forward to talking about that with you. Of course, I'm here to give you my favorite cash game play of the week, my tournament play, salary play, and a matchup I like on the slate as well. And without further ado, let's get into my cash game play of the week, which is going to be Miranda Maverick at 9.2K. All right, in cash games, I like paying up for Miranda Maverick, and this is a really, really tough cash slate. There are very few obvious targets, and even Miranda Maverick I don't think is a must. Like, you could easily create cash lineups that do not include her, so it's just sort of an early opinion I have. It's still only Thursday, but the reasons why I do like Miranda Maverick, she's the biggest favorite on this card currently. I believe she's minus 220 or so on Pinnacle against Dione Barbosa, who Dione Barbosa's a pretty good grappler. I liked her coming into the UFC. I still think she has potential in this matchup, but she had pretty severe cardio issues in her UFC debut. Is taking this fight on a little bit of short notice too, and Miranda Maverick's just very experienced, well-rounded, and should have cardio advantages late, so that's why Maverick is lined as a solid favorite. Maverick also scores very well in wins historically: 110, 99, 110, 119, 104, and 85. I worry that this is not a great matchup for her to score. The fight is minus 300 to go the distance. Maverick is only plus 375 to win inside the distance, which is partially why I don't consider her a must. I mean, you could target finishing upside in this range, but potentially sneaky finishing equity considering the cardio dynamic late in the fight. Ultimately, Maverick just fights at a moderate pace. She can land takedowns. She can land a lot of significant strikes, and she's one of the more likely fighters on the slate to win. So I'm a little less focused on ceiling here. The ceiling options within this range are very risky, and there's some risk to Miranda Maverick as well, but Maverick is the biggest favorite on the slate, a pretty safe floor in that she can fight a hard 15 minutes, she can grapple, she can throw strikes in volume, and she has a pretty strong historic DraftKings finishes in wins. So I think she's a pretty strong cash game option on this particular slate. I will be interested to pay up for her at 9.2K. All right, my tournament play of the week, I'm going to go with Bill Algeo at 8.9K. It is really, really difficult to pay up this week, and you can make pretty heavy cases against a lot of these fighters, including Algeo, who is 8.9 and only, minus 165 to win. I mean, he's definitely overpriced considering what we would typically expect from an 8.9K fighter, and he doesn't wrestle a lot. He doesn't win inside the distance a lot. He's only plus 300 to win inside the distance in this matchup against Doo Ho Choi. So I don't know. I mean, people might play Bill Algeo because there's like literally no other options, but he certainly doesn't rate out phenomenally well, and I'm hoping that impacts ownership enough for me to get some leverage against the field, because I still do like him despite him not rating out well. I like the pace that he sets. He's an aggressive striker, and he's typically durable. He's coming off a KO loss in the first round, but a semi-controversial stoppage. He was never actually knocked down. Hasn't been knocked down at any time in his UFC career. And he's fighting Doo Ho Choi, who is a good technical striker and has a lot of power and will fight pretty aggressively early. And I think Choi does have early damaging potential. But Choi also slows down, and Choi gets hurt quite a bit. And Choi's been knocked down several times. Choi's been knocked out in the UFC multiple times. He hasn't been very active in that he's only fought once since 2019 due to mandatory military service. So I do question what Choi looks like after the first round here. Algeo is going to strike at a high pace. He's landed upwards of 110 significant strikes multiple times. He can mix in a takedown or two. He's a good submission grappler, and I think he just has multiple ways to produce offense, especially down the stretch. And if Doo-Ho Choi's tired, he could easily get hurt. He gets hurt often. Despite the plus 300 inside distance line for Algeo, I think he has finishing equity. Algeo does score relatively well in wins, 107, 116, 91 his last 3 wins. It's a really tough slate, and I'm far from certain that Algeo wins or smashes, but I like the pace he sets. I like his potential to do damage. 8.9K is a decent price to pay. I like Algeo quite a bit in tournaments this week. All right, next up, my salary play of the week. I'm going to go with Haider Aimil at 7.1K. He's coming off a UFC debut win, which scored him 132 points. And I was on him in that UFC debut win. That's just, I got to be honest. And that's probably why I like him as well in this fight. But more realistically, I like him because of the pace he sets. He's a brawler. He will fight aggressively. He can throw a lot of volume. He just landed 79 significant strikes in 7 minutes in that UFC debut. And that's a lot of what I saw from him on the regional scene. And the reason why people didn't like him as much coming into the UFC is because he had a really hard-fought decision on the Contender Series where he didn't score a lot of points. But that was because his opponent was spamming takedowns for the entirety of the fight, and it was really hard for Emil to get off on his offense. Now he's fighting Jung-Hong Lee, who is a Korean kickboxer, I would say. He does have a grappling background as well, but I would say more success will come from him on the feet. I think he'll be willing to engage with Emil. And I mean, this is still a somewhat competitively lined fight. Emil is only plus 163 to win. Lee is minus 191. I think that it's one of the fights I like. So I couldn't use this as the matchup of the week. I think it'll be fought at a high pace. It's minus 165 to end inside the distance. Emil pushing forward will force Lee to engage, will mean that Lee probably needs to hurt Emil and put him away to win this fight convincingly. And Lee is plus 130 to win inside the distance. I think it's a totally fine and potentially strong pay-up target there at 9.1K. But conversely, if you need a safe salary, I really like Emil at 7.1K. We know he's going to produce a lot of offense. He can fight at a hard pace. And there's no guarantee that Jung-Hong Lee will be able to match him in a brawl. Emil is plus 325 to win inside the distance. I think is a reasonable ceiling for the price, reasonable win equity. Again, I love the pacing, and he will be my salary play of the week. Finally, my matchup of the week. There's still a couple really, really strong matchups left to talk about, but the one I'm going to choose is Kenan Krzyzewski versus Kurt Holobaugh. A very competitively lined fight here with Krzyzewski minus 133, Holobaugh plus 116 on DraftKings. Krzyzewski's 8.7K, Holobaugh 7.5K. Holobaugh is another brawler, very aggressive fighter, pressure, throws a lot of volume. I've loved Kurt Holobaugh throughout the majority of his career. I've backed him many, many times, and he unfortunately has lost many of those fights. But he's fighting Krzyzewski, who is like a Muay Thai striker, does have some grappling background as well. But was face planted in his UFC debut in the first round, and unfortunately, the only other loss of his pro career, he's 15-2. He was also face planted in the first round. So it's hard to trust Krzyzewski's durability, and against a fighter like Holobaugh, who's going to try and kill him. I mean, it's very, very easy to picture the upside for Kurt Holobaugh. Holobaugh is a near pick'em at 7.5K. with clear early KO ability, plus 215 to win inside the distance. Holobaugh is one of the best dogs on this slate, I think, and I think he will be popular. Krzyzewski, coming off that UFC debut loss, I'm hoping will not be popular because I also think he has a lot of upside. Plus 145 to win inside the distance. Kurt Holobaugh, because he brings a high pace, if you beat him, you have to either match and exceed that pace or hurt him or out-grapple him. Kurt Holobaugh doesn't get knocked out a lot, but he has been knocked out. He was also just taken down at will and dominated on the ground for like the entire fight by Trey Ogden. So I think Krzyzewski has grappling equity as well. Granted, he's not a primary grappler, but in his Contender Series fight, he literally took his opponent down, took his back, and choked him out. So I think if Krzyzewski wins, it's via damage, via grappling. He's plus 145 to win inside the distance, and it's probably going to be the leverage side. So really high upside for this fight as a whole. I think definitely ownership's going to be skewed toward the Hollabaugh side, which I understand, but don't overlook Krzyzewski there at 8.7K, one of the very best matchups on this slate. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week's UFC Quick Picks. Thank you so much for the support. You can follow me on Twitter, Brett Appley, TTP. EstablishTheRun.com for all your DraftKings needs. Just did an hour-and-a-half podcast with my boy Gordo Gambles, break down every single fight on the slate. We have full written breakdowns there as well, projections, rankings, slate summary, all that good stuff, all the content you need to help you win on DraftKings. Once again, best of luck in your contests. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.